Hi there, Warren here. Welcome back to my channel. I roasted a coffee recently that on paper should have been really good. The timing was right, the colour looked right, even the roast itself felt calm and controlled. Nothing stood out as a problem. But when I made a coffee a few days later, it just didn't have anything behind it. Not sour, not bitter, just thin. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something was missing. And that's a much harder problem to understand. Over the past couple of months, I've been doing a lot of repeat roasts on the Gene Café. Same coffees, similar setups, trying to remove as many variables as I can. And something has started to show up quite consistently. There are roasts that look completely fine, even quite good, but when you actually drink them, they don't have the body or presence you expect. So in this video, I want to walk through a few things I've started paying attention to that seem to explain why that gap happens. This particular roast stood out because nothing during the process fell off. It followed the shape I was expecting, the colour changes looked steady, and by the end, visually, it landed exactly where I would normally be happy. If I had stopped there, just looked at the beans, I would have called it a success. But in the cup, it just didn't carry through. There was no real weight to it, no depth, and very little aftertaste. And that's when it clicked for me. I'd been judging the roast almost entirely on how it looked at the end, rather than how it actually got there. Once I noticed it, I started looking back across other roasts, and the same pattern was there, with different coffees, slightly different profiles, but the same outcomes or similar outcomes. They looked right, but didn't feel right. And that's where things started to shift a bit in how I think about roasting. The first thing I started to realise is that colour alone doesn't tell you how developed the coffee actually is. Two roasts can look very similar, but behave very differently in the cup. And in my case, the ones that tasted weak often hadn't had enough momentum late in the roast, even if the colours looked right, or great even. The second thing, and this surprised me a bit, was how closely this seemed to line up with weight loss. The roasts that felt fuller, more rounded, tended to land in a slightly higher range, and the weaker ones were usually on the lower side. Not dramatically different, but enough to notice. And then there's something else that took me a while to separate, which is roast versus extraction. Because when a coffee tastes weak, it's very easy to assume the roast is wrong. But sometimes it's actually how you brew it. In my case, I've had shots that tasted thin at high ratios, or longer ratios, but became much fuller when I poured them shorter. Same coffee, very different results. So now, when something tastes weak, I try not to jump straight to one conclusion. I look at three things. Did the roast have enough development? Where did it land overall? And how am I actually brewing it? And just asking those questions has actually made a bigger difference than I expected. Not because I've suddenly figured it all out, far from it, but it's changed what I do next when something doesn't taste right. Before, I'll go straight back to the roast. I'd assume I'd underdeveloped it, or missed something during first crack, or the profile wasn't just right. So I change things, sometimes quite aggressively. Longer development, higher endpoint. Tried to fix what I thought had gone wrong. But a lot of the time, I was solving the wrong problem. Now I pause a bit. I look at where the roast actually landed. I check the weight loss, and just as importantly, I look at how I'm brewing it, because in a few cases, nothing was actually wrong with the roast at all. It just needed a different approach in the cup. And that shift from reacting to stepping back and checking has probably been the most useful change for me so far. What I'm still trying to understand, though, is where the upper boundary really is, because pushing development does seem to bring more body, more weight, more presence in the cup, but only up to a point. Go too far, and that same fullness can start to feel heavy, or a bit flat, or even slightly dull. And the tricky part is, that line isn't obvious during the roast. It's not a clear moment. It's more like a gradual shift that you only really understand afterwards. So right now, I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of that range. Sometimes landing just short, sometimes maybe a little too far. And I don't think I've fully mapped it yet. But that's probably the interesting part, because it means there's still something to explore. Not just in how long the roast runs, but in how the whole system behaves as you push it. So, if you like this type of story or this type of content, please like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. It really does help the channel. And enjoy your coffee, one roast at a time.